Good afternoon, Seven Investors, and welcome to the Friday edition of Seven Investing Now. Those of you who joined us last time, this is a different type of financial news program. At Seven Investing, our mission is to empower you to invest in your future. That means we won't be reacting to the news of the day or worrying too much about short-term market moves. We're focused on helping you play the long game. My name is Daniel Brooks Kline, but you can call me Dan. I'm joined today by two of my fellow lead advisors at Seven Investing, Austin Lieberman and Steve Symington. Steve, you were supposed to be on Wednesday. You had some technical problems. There were gremlins. Maybe the Noid got in there. Are you back? Is everything fixed?
I'm back. We had a regional network outage at my cable company, and coupled with a slow computer, I hedged my bets, bought a new computer, and it's playing nice, so here we are.
It looks great. And for the first time on this program, well, it's the first time for Steve, but Steve was supposed to be on last time. Mm-hmm. For the first time, we have Austin Lieberman. Austin, tell the Seven Investors a little bit about yourself.
Happy Friday, everybody. Steve, I thought a bear might have dug up the fiber cables, if you even have fiber cables out there in Montana. I'm Austin Lieberman. I love finding and researching mostly founder-led software type of companies, but I try to just cast a wide net out there and invest in great companies that are growing fast with great technologies.
So here's what we're going to do today. We're working out the format. We're figuring it out. We're going to start with the top story. That's kind of the biggest story that we're all talking about. Then we're going to follow that up with a segment called What We're Watching. That's one story from each of us. We all got to pick. There are three really, really different stories. Then, of course, we're going to talk about some of our worst investing mistakes. We welcome you to play along in the chat. We are doing this a new way. We have Samantha Bailey, our director of marketing. She is behind the scenes directing the program. So, again, this is the second time we've done this. Bear with us. It is going to be fun. With that, Seven Investors, let's take a look at what we have coming up as the big story. Will the pandemic lead to major changes in where people live and work? It's led to major changes for me. Before the pandemic, I worked at home. I had a den about 3 feet from my couch. I could work on the couch, watch a little Get Up on ESPN. Then I could move over to my office. Now I drive a mile each day to this very, very overheated studio I'm coming to you from at a cowork because my wife has taken over my office. Steve, will the pandemic lead to major changes in where people live and work?
I think it will, and it already is. I think it will usher in major change in how we think about where we work, particularly as it pertains to remote workers. Many people and companies have really recognized how much they can do remotely, and sometimes that how much ends up being the entirety of their job. So we've already seen a lot of the biggest tech companies come out and say they're going to allow at least some of their employees to work remotely from now on a permanent basis. And I don't think that's going to change after the pandemic wanes.
I'm actually not as bullish on this as some people are. So I believe, and Austin, we'll kick to you in a second. I believe they're going to say it. I believe they're going to do it. But the reality is, if there is still an office and you don't go to the office, it's very hard to be part of the company. It is very hard to be part of the mainstream. I understand the desire to live someplace different. I live in West Palm Beach. Steve lives in Montana. Austin also lives in Florida. There's a benefit to living here, but there are some negatives to not going into the office. And I think more people are going to realize that, oh, hey, yeah, Microsoft will let me work from home. Sure, they will. But maybe they're not necessarily going to promote me or give me a raise. In fact, they might even pay me less. Austin, your thoughts here?
I agree with both of you. I think this trend is real. We've already seen it, like Steve talked about. There's companies announcing work from home forever. Dan, like you're talking about, there's still the issue of what does that mean for my career? What does that mean for my pay? We've seen those headlines of companies adjusting pay based off cost of living. So I think we're going to see a hybrid model. There's going to be work from home options. We just saw Microsoft announce that basically from the standard is going to be that around 50% of the time people can work from home with approval from your manager up to more than that and 100%. And it's going to be messy for a while. We're going to see some bad headlines about pay getting cut. And but the truth is that if you live in a cheaper part of the country, your pay might get cut, but you might end up having a higher overall net income based off of your cost of living. So I think this is here to stay. It's not going to be everything. It's not going to be nothing. It's going to be painful. There's going to be a lot of headlines in between, but I think it's an overall good thing. And the other thing not a lot of people are talking about is the cut down on emissions from people driving and stuff like that. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see how this progresses.
I've had a major cut down in fuel efficiency. So my car, which normally gets 38 miles a gallon, I drive a Nissan Versa. Because I drive 1 mile to work, I now get 8 miles a gallon. It's the least efficient. I would fill up, and it used to say I'd have maybe 380 mile range. It's a 10-gallon tank. Now it's 220. It is a giant change.
Should just go buy an F-350 in that case.
Not a great idea, given that I can barely fit in my parking space as it is in my building. So one of the big stories here is people are leaving cities. There's 16,000 vacant apartments in Manhattan. That's triple the normal amount. So now the vacancy rate in Manhattan, which is usually 2 to 3%, is 6%. I say this is kind of a non-story. So there's a lot of people. My brother, who is a big-time executive with William Morris Endeavor, he lives in New York City. He lives walking distance to his office. It's basically Union Square. When this started, he actually got coronavirus. He's now recovered. As soon as he recovered, he packed up his belongings and has been living in Miami for the past 7 months. When his lease was up, he flew back up to New York, put his stuff in storage, and is now paying a third the money. But when the pandemic is over, he's going back. There are a lot of people like that. Austin, do you think there's really going to be an exodus from cities? All the stuff is in the cities. That's where the sports teams and the concerts and the restaurants are. I just don't see it. Austin, your thoughts?
Again, yes and no. We're seeing this immediate reaction where there apparently is some type of exodus. That's what we're going to see in all the headlines and everything like that. But then there's going to be some really cheap real estate rates and rental rates and stuff like that. So after a few years, we're going to see an influx back in. And again, I think people will take advantage of the opportunity to have a little more space, cheaper living, live in more comfort, further away from neighbors. But there's a lot of people that are going to like that big city life. And so, I think we'll see a change, but it's not going to be as drastic as the doomsday headlines about Manhattan and all that stuff are making it out to be. Maybe in the short term it will, but I don't think in the long term. I think those cities will be okay.
Steve, let me throw in a little, and I'll give you the last word here. Yeah, I think what an office looks like is going to change. So it's going to look more like a co-work, where you maybe have your own cubby or storage area, but you don't necessarily have your own desk or office. There's going to be a lot more meeting rooms. There's going to be Zoom equipment in every room. So, I'll tell you one thing that's definitely changed. If you're sick, you're not going to work. Your company's going to be totally good with you staying home. The vast majority of companies, if you have a white-collar job, are going to be fine with Steve saying, hey, I normally come in, but my kids have a school play today, and I want to be able to leave for an hour to go to that. We have the ability to do that. That's going to be the big change. It's not some massive, everybody's getting rid of offices. Because you know what's cool about an office? Your coworkers are there. I'd like to see all of you guys every day. Not feasible given where we all live, but I wish we had an office we could go to. Steve, I'll give you the final thought here.
Yeah, it's funny because I do think, you're really on base with that, and I have a unique experience, having worked from home for so long, for the last 8 years or so, and including the better part of the last year at Seven Investing, and it's just, I see so much more flexibility in the way they're approaching it. Again, I think there is going to be kind of a fundamental shift in the way we think about it.
So let me ask you guys one final fun question. I miss working in an office. Now, we all came from the same place, or Steve and you and I came from the same place. And I used to go into the office once a month for 2 or 3 days, and I'd tape some podcasts, but mostly I'd have coffee meetings with coworkers. I would just catch up with people. I like that aspect of it. Now, I don't want to do that every day. What is something you guys miss? Austin, you can go first. What do you miss about working in an office?
The companies that I've worked at that had an office, I was in the military, active duty military for 7 years. I don't miss anything about those offices because they were all outdated buildings with major improvements that could have been made. I love being with the teams in there though. But at the jobs I've had since, there always happened to be some really yummy, nice restaurants below the office or whatever. And a lot of companies they refund lunches if they're for meetings and stuff. And we would happily take advantage of that. And of course, we'd discuss meaningful work stuff at these lunches. But I miss that community aspect for sure, Dan.
Pat Srinivas says, no more Brooks Brothers. Hello, shorts and sandals. For the team behind the glass, Sam Bailey, I only see like one or two things in the chat at a time. I'm not sure if that's by design or how it works, but so if I'm not sharing as much from the chat, I apologize. We're still working out the technical stuff. Steve, it's been a long time. What do you miss working in office?
It's funny. Pat says no more Brooks Brothers, hello, shorts and sandals. I'm not even wearing shoes right now, by the way. The office I used to work in was so laid back. We were a little software company, and we had a guy who rode a miniature tricycle to the bathroom, and it was hilarious. It was sort of the office it was. So formality wasn't really an issue for me, but I do kind of miss that in-person camaraderie. That's, I think, the one thing that I do sort of miss, even though, we have a much better technology platform, and, we've worked essentially remotely, together as a team at Seven Investing for the better part of the last year. And, I feel like we know each other well, but you do sort of thirst to be able to, shake hands and sit down with each other in person. So I think really that's maybe the thing that I've missed, even though we've sort of advanced sufficiently technology-wise to be able to feel sort of that camaraderie, even though we're across the country.
Yeah, nobody would ever get tired of the guy riding the tricycle to the bathroom. That would be endlessly entertaining. This program is, of course, brought to you by the team at Seven Investing. At Seven Investing, we offer a simple proposition. You give us $17 a month, we give you our 7 best stock picks. We also give you a lot more. We give you this program, but this program's free. We do a lot of video that's just for members. We haven't done that yet. We're going to be doing that. We're going to have a blog launching on the site that, sure, there's going to be some free stuff. There's also going to be special insight from us, from the team. 7 picks is a lot. Which one should you buy? How do we invest? How do we make our own personal decisions? I personally have made a deal where I'm going to buy at least one share of Max's pick, of Max Chatsko's pick each month and write about it because his investing style is so different than mine. So join us, 7investing.com/subscribe. Now we're moving on to what we're watching. In this segment, each of us added one story to our show prep document. This is whatever we're looking at, whatever we're excited about today. Steve, you wanted to talk about a part of Amazon that it's a giant deal, but it doesn't actually get talked about all that often.
Right. We might call this the current state of the video game streaming market because it turns out Amazon's dominating it. So Stream Hatchet, a data analytics firm owned by Logitech, released a new report on Wednesday estimating that Amazon-owned Twitch controls over 91% of the live video game streaming market. And that's in terms of hours streamed, not necessarily revenue, but it's really a mind-bogglingly dominant business in this niche, and it's growing quickly. So Twitch can partly thank Microsoft for that because Microsoft shut down its own streaming platform, Mixer, in July. But at the start of this year, Twitch reportedly had a roughly 73% market share of the streaming market. Now it's 91%. So not only Mixer controlled around 14% before it shut down. So it looks like Twitch is not only taking the lion's share of Mixer's viewership, but it's also taking market share from other platforms in the process, like YouTube gaming and Facebook gaming. So weekly streaming hours so far this year are up around 73% year over year in 2020. And that's basically including 4.7 billion hours of video game streaming content watched on Twitch alone last quarter, which is just remarkable.
Steve, let me throw something out. How do they monetize this?
So Twitch, the way they monetize through advertising is, I'd say, their core method. And we've kind of seen a rebound in digital advertising revenue lately, and really. It's most of it's advertising. They also have little in-game purchases. You can buy little nods that you can actually, they do revenue sharing agreements with the streamers where you can tip the people you're watching, and Amazon takes a cut of that, and little bits and little in-app purchases basically. But But it's not just that. I don't think Amazon breaks out Twitch sales separately. But I've seen reports that it generated around 1.5 billion in revenue for Amazon last year, and
which is a little bit hysterical given that they paid $1 billion for it. And Steve,
right,
Steve, I remember at the time when they paid this, I was asking younger coworkers, my son, like, what is this? What did they just pay $1 billion for? And pretty much every person I know who games said this was the steal of the century. It's really turned out that
incredible.
way.
And actually adjusted for options and other items, their purchase price was closer to 842 million. It turns out later in SEC filings. So considering they generated reportedly twice that in revenue last year, and they bought the company for something like, it was like 70 times trailing 12 month sales at the time. It was really a forward-looking purchase. And I think, judging by the size of the video game streaming market, it's not unreasonable to think that we might have a business within Amazon that's sort of quietly operating that could be worth 20, 30, 40, 50 billion dollars by itself. Once this really continues to take off, because we're talking about streaming hours increasing 73%. And if Amazon really wants to look at monetizing that, it's incredible. But the other thing, to keep in mind is, as it does with so many other perks, Amazon's using Twitch as a hook for boosting Prime membership. So its Prime gaming service was previously Twitch Prime, and it includes a free monthly Twitch channel subscription, a bunch of free in-game content, several free PC games every month. And I actually just signed up for it. I was like, oh, this is a thing. And so it's kind of slick. But really the end goal is to not only let Twitch grow organically and generate sales outside of Prime, but also to expand the value proposition for Prime members. And that's their bread and butter, really, for current and future subscribers.
When I first saw the deal, I thought Amazon was just paying up for the dance move that all the young kids are doing out there,
TikTok dances.
Yeah. So I was about to say I've watched exactly no minutes of Twitch. I turned 47 next week. I am not exactly in the demographic. That said, that's not true, because one of my musician friends, Sam Ensike, he does his practices on Twitch. So I can watch my buddy play guitar and work through his repertoire. So I actually do watch Twitch, and I stream it from my phone to my television using my TiVo device. And I know you're saying TiVo device, but TiVo has a $50 player in partnership with Roku that's actually, I think, the best player out there. It does a lot of really cool stuff. So I have been on Twitch, and I point that out only because if they can move into markets such as adults who aren't really gamers, that's an even bigger platform, and there's a lot of space to grow there.
Yeah. I'll add something. Again, Austin mentioned the dances, and I remember my kid doing Fortnite dances long before. He just walk around doing these dances long before Amazon acquired Twitch. And I'm really interested to see what happens once my children grow up, because they're going to continue watching this stuff, and they are so tech savvy and gamer savvy. And, I have to limit the time they watch on YouTube, like people streaming video games. It's absurd, and it's going to be something to watch these kids grow up and see what kind of markets they usher in.
We've just established that Steve is a better parent than I am, because I am more than happy when my teenager is occupied by YouTube. You're watching 7 Investing Now. I am Dan Kline. I am joined by Steve Symington, Austin Lieberman. Austin, you're up next. So you want to talk a little bit about a company I didn't know much about, Cardlytics. Why don't you tell the 7 investors sort of what Cardlytics does?
Yeah, so specifically about Cardlytics, they just released a report about the U.S. State of Spend Holiday Edition. And why this is interesting to me is because we've seen a lot of changes with COVID, spending moving online. And this report actually indicates a little bit of that spending is starting to move back into brick and mortar and retail places. So how does this company, Cardlytics, come up with this type of report, right? So a lot of people probably never even heard of it before. It's a $2 billion market cap company. But what's crazy, and why I think it's such an interesting company, is that they have spend data. They have insight into spend data from more than $157 million bank customers. And they see the data from 1 in 2. So that's 50% of all US card swipes. That's credit and debit cards. And that gives them insight into over $3 trillion in annual spend. And this is a $2 billion company. It's crazy. So the way that they do that is that they partner with banks to sell advertising inside of the bank's digital channels. So if you have an app or you look at your bank on the internet, you'll see discounts from Whole Foods or from Uber or whatever. And you usually don't even have to click on them. You just use your credit card and that discount gets applied back to your account. So they sell that to the companies that are advertising that stuff. And the advertisers are the ones that end up paying Cardlytics. So that's how their model works. And the interesting thing from this most recent state of spend report, they did one kind of as the pandemic was starting, and they saw early indications that people were obviously moving from in-store to online purchases. But they were one of the first places that I saw indication that the online grocery delivery was growing. And for me as an investor, the thing I start to look at is like, okay, what are the companies behind this that are enabling that? Who's going to benefit from this more digital model? So that's why I look at these types of reports. In their go ahead, Dan.
Let me jump in here. So before the pandemic, digital sales were about 13.4%. I throw that out because as a percentage of retail sales, that includes groceries. It doesn't include cars. I say that because people always assume that retail sales had largely moved to the internet. We did some trivia about this at another place, and people guessed 50% or higher, and it was 13.4%. It was actually forecast to go to about 15% this year, and it will probably end up at about 20, depending on the impact of the pandemic. That being said, is Cardlytics data something that companies can use to forecast inventory, to see trends, to know, hey, we need more stuff in the warehouse, less stuff in the store? Are they able to use the data that way?
That's exactly something that they're trying to develop more and more on the platform. So the first step was kind of to be able to sell this advertising space. But now as they get more data, the company matures a little bit, their technology gets better. That's exactly what they're starting to do, is say, hey, we have all of this data. We can now, if you partner with us and you're a customer of ours, we can actually provide you these strategic insights so that you can get ahead of that demand or make sure that your inventory is aligned the right way and you're spending in the right channels, digital or in-store or whatever. So that is exactly the competency that they're starting to work on.
As we close up here on Cardlytics, who are they competing with? Is there anyone else in this space?
Their biggest competitors really are other advertisers that you might see out there, that because they're competing for marketing budgets, right? So if you think the Facebooks, the Pinterests, the Googles of the world, any place that people can go and spend their advertising dollars, but there's nobody else that's doing it inside of banks' channels, completely digitally native, building it niche from the ground up like Cardlytics. So let me share one quick takeaway, Dan. So the overall spend since year over year from last year is actually not down that much. It's down 5.4%. So that Cardlytics data is starting to show that we're starting to get some of this consumer spend, this consumer discretionary spend back up to normal levels. And then everybody's focused on e-commerce, right? E-commerce spend is actually trending down a little bit, not year over year. It's just not accelerating as much. So pre-COVID in April, beauty was up 53%. Gaming was up 87%, to give you two examples. Now in August, beauty's up 21% and gaming is up 38%. So still growing, but what we're seeing is that acceleration is slowing down and things are starting to normalize a little bit. And as an investor, I start to think about, okay, what does that mean for all these e-commerce companies and brick and mortar stores, and where are some opportunities out there?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely accelerated omni-channel shopping. So I know I can and do go to stores. I've been to the mall. I've been to the outlet mall. I'm going to the grocery store later today because I want to cook salmon for dinner tonight, and I don't like someone else picking out fish for me. That said, a lot of times I think, hey, I could go to the store, but I'll just use Instacart. Like, that there are a lot of things that previously I might have done in person that I've sort of mentally just shifted my behavior. Now, I was always a big person on getting deliveries. I live in a building. My parking space is pretty far from where my door is. So I don't generally, want to get like heavy things like a case of water at the grocery store. I get that delivered. But right now, of course, you have to pick up deliveries in the lobby. So it doesn't make as much sense. Austin, Sandeep David said, Austin has redefined the way I invest. I'm going to take that as a compliment. It is probably meant as a compliment, so we will take it that way.
I know, Sandeep. Thank you. I really appreciate all his interactions. Thank you.
So we're going to move on to my story here. Domino's. They had a stellar quarter, and the market didn't like it. This is where analysts get things wrong, and it drives me insane. So Domino's same-store sales were up 17.5%. They had slightly higher costs, but their third quarter net income was $99.1 million, or $2.39 per share. That's up from last year, where it was $2.05 per share, $86.4 million. Analysts thought it was going to be $2.79, so their stock is down 10% over 2 days. This is insane. This is a company that has executed unbelievably well during a pandemic, and it's like 6 years of same-store sales growth. Like every quarter, they're getting bigger. They add stores, they add sales, they add customers. It makes absolutely no sense. So it's one of those things where you have to take the long-term view. Well, what do you see with Domino's? They've added customers to their digital ecosystem. That is really, really important. Those are customers that will already be comfortable with Domino's after this. They will stay here. They've proven themselves to people. It's one where Steve, I just don't understand it.
Yeah, well, I've heard you talk about how lousy Domino's pizza is, but that doesn't really seem to matter, does it?
No, Domino's isn't a pizza play, and I understand.
It's so good. Their pizza's
I
so
think
good.
It's not bad.
Okay, this is shame on both of you. We're getting on a plane. We are flying to. We'll start in New Haven, Connecticut. We'll go to Modern. We'll go to Sally's. We'll go to Pepe's. Then we'll drive up to Boston. We'll go to Santarpio's. We'll go to Pizzeria Regina. Most towns have better pizza than Domino's. But here's the reality. I live in Florida. Austin lives in Florida. Anthony's coal-fired is all right. It's better than Domino's, but it's not so much better than Domino's. That the convenience. What Domino's is they're an execution play. They are really, really good at getting you pizza. They'll deliver it to you on the beach. That's impressive. They also own the patent on that little pizza tracker device that shows, hey, your pizza's in the oven, your pizza's in the box, your pizza's on the way to delivery, your pizza's at your door. I wouldn't shock me if a year from now they had trackers and they could tell you when you finished your pizza and you should order another one. This is an unbelievably well-run company that has proven, they've absolutely proven they don't need a great product. They need a good enough product. Guys, really, Domino's? You're eating Domino's by choice, and it's not 2 a.m?
Well, sometimes it's 2 a.m.
Yeah, the last time I had Domino's is I was checking into a hotel in the Baltimore area, and it was 1:30 in the morning, and the only available food was Domino's or a vending machine. It was a close call. It was basically like dinner could be Skittles, dinner could be Domino's. I went with Domino's. I'm still not so sure of that. So we're going to move on to share some of our worst investing mistakes. This is always fun to do because everyone has terrible, terrible decisions they've made. A lot of them are when we started. We all had those times we bought penny stocks. We did something absolutely ridiculous. But Steve, you made one, and it's really easy to make. Why don't you kick it off here?
Yeah, and before we dive into that, I noticed one comment that I don't want to disappear. I saw XXXS mention that we should talk about FEAC stock. I think he's talking about Flying Eagle Acquisition Company, and I'm not sure we're well prepared to provide an informed decision. But hey, something on my radar. I'll take a look. I think it was a special acquisition company. But moving on from there, my mistake. I've made my fair share of investing mistakes. So it's really hard to quantify, what I might consider my biggest. But rewinding back to when I first started investing right out of college, my company's 401k match was 100% in company stock. And I thought, great, free money. Let's just let those shares ride. And this was Textron, actually, which was a company that acquired the company that acquired us. And I told some of the story on Twitter. This was back around 2006 or so. And Textron had been on a roll. It's a big industrial conglomerate aerospace company. And its stock had almost doubled by the end of 2007. And really, we all know what happened next. This is late 2007. Textron had a financial arm that wreaked some havoc on the company in the financial crisis. And I watched these shares plummet from right around $72 per share to, I think, $3 and change. And I mean, that's harrowing to watch as a young, relatively new investor. And in the process, I basically watched a third of my 401k just evaporate. And it was all due to the overexposure to a single stock, not any single stock, but my company stock, because 100% of our 401k match was in company stock. And that is something that it's a mistake a lot of people make. It's really easy because you can be complacent and let that ride. And to be fair, it did rebound pretty hard. And whether by stroke of dumb luck or ignorance at the time, I managed to buy some more shares close to the bottom and then watched them. It was like a 7-bagger, before I finally sold everything. But that was an extenuting circumstance, and maybe not the wisest decision.
Let me jump in. So when you're getting, shares of company stock, do the rules vary everywhere? Are you allowed to? Do you have to wait till it vests before you can rebalance?
Most companies will allow you to rebalance. You can go in there, you can sell those shares. Sometimes, like in my case, I was lucky enough to have in my 401k at the time. It was a Fidelity 401k that had a thing called brokerage link, where we could invest in individual stocks instead of just their basket of mutual funds that they force you to choose from. But even if it means selling some of those shares of company stock and transitioning them over to some of those other mutual funds, just to diversify, don't have, a third or half of your entire 401k in company stock, because if something happens to your company, and I learned that the hard way, it was nuts watching, a third of my 401k that had, so many Textron shares at $72 a share. It was literally like $342, I think, is when I was just jaw dropping for someone when you're new. And, thankfully I didn't have that much to lose. I was still a young investor, but it felt big at the time and it hurt.
I worked for Uproar, a game show company that went public during the height of the internet boom in the 90s. And I wasn't a first employee, so my stock allotment was nothing special. But I had some friends who were paper millionaires who couldn't sell. More importantly, I had some friends that when they could sell, didn't. And it was crushingly hard. One day you're a millionaire. 6 months later, you're worth like 40 grand. It is not great. TJ McKinney says, my biggest mistake is investing in a spec penny stock. Yeah, penny stocks are penny stocks for a reason. Don't buy them. The only exception is if you intimately understand the company and truly believe in it. There might be a cannabis company or two that's a penny stock that you believe can rebound. Yeah. Pat Srinivas says, selling solar, that's SEDG, just as Trump got elected. I tear up just thinking about it. I try not to worry about the mistakes I've made. Austin, you are guilty of a common mistake. We've probably all tried this at some point. I'm too lazy to have tried it, but most of you have tried it. Trying to time the market.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I was going to say I don't make any mistakes, but you blew that one up. So this is common, right? And so A, let's not be too hard on ourselves, but B, let's make sure we learn from it and don't make the same mistake twice. But, I could basically connect every major mistake I've made investing back to somehow trying to time something and just losing focus on I'm investing for years or decades or even longer potentially for my family. That's like the core reason of why I invest. Every mistake I've made comes back to me focusing on the next 6 months or the next year. And so I just try to remember that. But yeah, I mean, specifically this example, I worked in a job that I was at home. I worked remote. This is in January of this year. And I was always, online and working and browsing Twitter and stuff like that. So I had really early in this whole coronavirus thing in mid to late January, I started to see all the news headlines from China and realized, hey, this is probably going to be a serious thing. The trade war, the trade negotiations really disrupted markets around the world, especially the US market. Well, now that we're seeing the entire China, economy of China shut down, basically, I thought that was going to disrupt markets even more. And so I made some adjustments to my portfolio and did some different things based on the fact that I thought coronavirus was going to be a big deal. And it ended up being a big deal. But the challenging thing, even when you have the right idea and you time the first part, which could be buying or selling right, you still have to time about 3 more things right to be correct and do well overall. And it's stressful. It takes a lot of time. And what I've learned is basically every single time I've done it, it destroys future returns. I didn't do anything to, blow my portfolio up, but I would be much better off if I had just stayed invested in great companies left them alone, focused my time, my energy on other things like my family and my job or just my health, whatever, than worrying about what stock is going to be hurt for the next 6 months. But if you remember the headlines back then, they were scary, right? And you think about your job, your future, is your income secure and all of that stuff. And so it all comes back to just making sure I'm not investing money I might need in the next 3 years. I've got a little cash cushion in the bank. Everybody's is different. And then staying true to the way I invest, which is just find great companies and you look to add to them over time, not sell them.
Yeah, I understand the fear. And JP, one of our viewers, says, biggest mistake, selling everything in my portfolio during the pandemic and just trading in and out of stocks to make up for the downturn. Then watch most of it going up by 5-fold. Yeah, I've seen this on social media more. Should I sell all my stocks and then buy back in at lower prices? There's no guarantee of lower prices. Markets are unpredictable. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to guess, people always ask us, when is the best time to buy a stock? The answer is probably now. Because we don't know if it's going to go up or go down. If you told me, and I'll do a callback to my last story. If you told me Domino's was going to report increased profits and 17.5% same-store sale increase, and their stock would be down 10%, I would have bet $1,000 against that. If I could go to Vegas and make that bet. So right now, you just can't predict what's going to happen. It's not even worth trying. Steve, your next mistake, we're going to do two each, two for each of you. Yeah. Steve, your next mistake, I don't consider a mistake. Why don't you explain what you did?
And before we go there, I will say I can vouch for Austin's caution right before the pandemic. I remember one specific Slack message, by the way, before any of this became a big deal. And you posted it, a link to a news article, and you said, in Austin, you said, is this what causes the market to crash? And I was like, that's a bold proclamation. And sure as heck, yeah, that's what happened. But anyway, I'm going to go with the mistake that wasn't a mistake, something that was more recent, only 5 years ago, actually. And I've wrote about this on 7 Investing a little bit, but it's worth rehashing for people watching today. Only 5 years ago, our family bought our dream home, right? This is our forever house that we're in right now. But in order to help fund the down payment, I turned to my portfolio and I sold partial positions in a handful of stocks, including NVIDIA, 5 years ago. So to be more specific, I looked back at my brokerage statement to be sure about the exact number of shares, and I parted ways with 249 shares of NVIDIA at the time, 5 years ago, for a little over $5,000. And that was a cost basis of just under $22 a share. Really, that was only a modest fraction of the down payment on this house. And to be fair, that $22 a share, that $5,000 was something like a triple for me. So I felt pretty good about taking profits there, even though I still liked NVIDIA as a business. You know, it's one of those that I even went on to write about a lot and say, I really still like NVIDIA, even though I sold those shares just, to help fund my down payment. And of course, if you check NVIDIA's share price today, at least yesterday at the close, I haven't looked at it today, trades a little over $550 per share. So my $249 or my 249 shares of NVIDIA that I sold for about $5,000 would have been worth closer to $138,000 today. And that's just holding on for another 5 years. So,
Steve, I understand the regret, but part of the reason we invest is for things like buying a house. Yep. So it's a tough thing. And I know with what we do, we can't sell something for a planned reason. I have a 16-year-old. He's going to go to college he's probably not going to go in 2 years. He's probably going to take a year or two and work. But he's going to go to college somewhere in the next 5 years, and I'm going to pay for that. I'm going to sell things I own to pay for that. And if I didn't do this for a living, I wouldn't look back. I always liken it to, you don't follow your ex-girlfriend on Facebook to see like, oh, she got a great job. Like she's married someone better looking than you. You don't want to know those things. And I joke a little bit because I have 2 ex-girlfriends and they're both still actually friends of mine. And one of them actually became Oprah's producer. So you don't want to know those things, necessarily. I've been married for 20 years very happily. That said, Steve, I get the hurt, but I actually think you made a good decision because you like your house. Your family lives there. All your stuff is there. It's really big. It's on a giant piece of land. Steve, what do you have, like 9,000 acres? Like what's that?
There's space. I like the house, and I'll agree. I can't call selling some stocks to buy a house a mistake. But in retrospect, I think it would change the way I decided to sell and which stocks I might decide to sell should I make a similar purchase going forward. So, there were several other stocks I didn't sell at the time that I had a far lower conviction for, and also lower profits, and really just hammers home the idea of letting your winners run and trimming your losers, trimming those stocks that you don't feel as strongly about. And JP in the comments made a great point. Your house appreciates too. I don't think personally of my house as an investment. But yes, the real estate market has done some pretty incredible things in the last 5 years as well. So the value of the house has increased substantially, but I'm not planning on selling anytime soon, and I'm not going to use it as a piggy bank. So, but yes, all valid points.
So Austin has one more of these. We'll get back to that in a second. You're watching 7 Investing Now. This is our Monday, Wednesday, Friday live show. We air at noon Eastern time, and then it's up on our YouTube page. You can watch us on YouTube. You can watch us on Facebook Live. Soon you'll watch us on Twitch. Let me thank Samantha Bailey, Jeff Richards. They are behind the scene making things happen. That's how the cameras are switching. That's how we're seeing some of the chat. We haven't quite figured all this out because when you're the host, you can see all the chat, and I can only see a couple. So it's a little bit difficult to bring in some of your questions, but we'll work on that. This is a work in progress. Austin, you made a mistake. You sold too soon. What stock did you sell?
Yeah, back to the whole not focusing on 5 to 10 years, but focusing on the here and now, right? And there's no excuse for this one. So I owned a little company called Shopify back in 2016, 2017. And there's an important lesson here. Honestly, it doesn't matter when I owned it in 2016 or 2017 or what price I would have paid back then. I would have had a mega winner by now just holding. So that's how I think about prices and stocks a little bit. If you find a great company, it's almost impossible to pay too much for it if your holding period is long enough. I think I owned 200 shares. It was around $40 a share. I think that was around an $8,000 position for me, which is, a large position for me, but I was adding monthly and it was growing. And I sold it for an awesome 30 or 50% gain. And I thought I was the best and I was going to buy more when it went lower. Well, now the price is around $5,000 a share. No, it's not, but it's $1,000 a share. And so I sold and maybe made, I don't know, $10,000 or something like that. If I would have just held on to it, it'd be a $200,000 position by itself right now. And the truth is, maybe that position would have become too large and I would have been uncomfortable or something like that. But if I simply would have just looked to trim it a little bit, if it became 30% of my portfolio and I got uncomfortable, but, still held on, I would be far better off than I am today.
So you notice before we move on, that's, you notice we're talking about some of our biggest mistakes being selling stocks we should have held on to. Often it's not like missing, I should have bought Netflix in 2006. It's letting go of stuff that we had the idea. We've done the research. We love these. And I think that's an important point is that a lot of our biggest regrets as people who are learning and growing as investors become stocks that we have sold that we probably shouldn't have. And it's so tempting. But recurring theme, you'll see
and Steve,
with learning
Steve,
to be a better
investor. That segs nicely. So Austin and I at 1:30 today, and this is going to be taped. It's not going to be live. We're going to be taping. When should I sell stocks? And it's an important question. It's one we get asked all the time. It's going to be part of our sort of like FAQ series that just goes on our site. So frankly, we don't have to answer that question every time. But there are some scenarios where you sell. There are, Joey Kline says, do you ever regret even just trimming a stock? If you're worried because so much of your portfolio is in one stock, and as much as Shopify is not a particularly risky stock, they are in an industry that has traditionally been upended. Nobody's using Yahoo Site Builder anymore. That was the dominant platform, for stores. Less people are using WordPress stores. There's a lot of other platforms out there that could, in theory, upset Shopify. So if you are worried about it, if it's hurting your mental health, it's not worth the upside. Look, if you trim your position, you still have upside. You still own it. You still have exposure to it. So I don't worry about that. I don't think about it too much. Guys, if you want to see that show that Austin and I are taping later, it will eventually be posted at 7investing.com. That's the number 7, investing.com. JP says, just trimmed a little off Roku at 205 and it ran up to 230. Nothing to feel bad about there. I'm hoping you bought something good. Now that could be another share. That could have been something you planned to buy. Maybe you only sold one share and it was a really nice dinner. We're going to move to the strong finish. Earlier this week, I posted a poll on Twitter. Sam, if you want to share that, you are more than welcome to. Asking what's the hardest part of being a long-term investor. And 1,100 of you weighed in. Let me read the poll while we figure out if we can get the graphic up. And I'll let each of you, that's Austin and Steve, weigh in. What's the hardest part of being a long-term investor? Ignoring volatility, seeing a stock go down, being patient, it's not hard at all. 44.7 of you said being patient. That's the hardest part. 21.5 said seeing a stock go down. That's about the same as said ignoring volatility at 23%. And only 10.8% of you said it's not hard at all. It is hard. Steve, your thoughts here?
Being patient that's the hardest thing for me. I don't mind volatility. If a stock I recommend drops 20%, fine in a single day. Like, as long as that doesn't affect my buy thesis, like if I see stocks fall, I celebrate it. And yes, I mean, being a long-term investor is difficult, but being patient, definitely, for sure.
Austin, what's the hardest one for you?
Yeah, same. I think volatility is a feature for long-term investors, not a bug, or it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing for long-term investors if you know how to handle it. Being patient, as you could tell by my stories, being patient, trying to get better at it.
Guys, that brings us to the end of this episode of 7 Investing Now. We're going to be back Monday at noon, Wednesday at noon next week. I don't think we're doing a Friday show next week. I'm having laser eye surgery, so no more glasses soon enough. We thank everyone for watching, and we'll see you Monday. This will be archived on YouTube. Guys, have a great afternoon.
See you, everybody. Thanks.
Bye-bye.